We now move on to our next keynote session titled The Future of Security Depends on a Platform Approach by Mr. Huzifa Motiwala, who is the Director of Systems Engineering, India and SARC at Palo Alto Networks. Welcome, Mr. Motiwala.
Hello, everyone. My name is Huzifa Motiwala. I am the head of systems engineering India and SARC for Palo Alto Networks. At the outset, it's a privilege to be here and talk to all of you about our vision, strategy, and execution. But first and foremost, thanks for taking your valuable time and attending this session, which I will endeavor to keep it interesting so that you have some very, very important takeaways. At the outset, in the next 10-15 minutes, I'm going to essentially talk about the new digitally transformation-driven architectures and the associated challenges that it brings about, primarily in terms of the change in threat landscape. And how do you look at effective ways and means to kind of address it, and primarily using a very platform-based approach that we at Palo Alto Networks have embarked upon. So with that, let me kickstart this. And let's all take a step back and talk about this entire rush towards the digital transformation, which was primarily accelerated by the pandemic. And fundamentally, what I believe is it kind of leveraged some very, very core technologies which were underlying. Number one, the expanded connectivity with more and more people being online than ever. Number two, the cloud capability, right? Enabling every organization to be more flexible, to be more agile and innovate at scale, right? So that economies of scale with cloud existed. And fundamentally leveraging AI and ML to analyze these masses of data, the large data that it collected to deliver some very, very critical insights and to ensure it helped making some huge leaps in decision making. So that fundamentally, that core technology that existed and people kind of embarked upon leveraging this created some very, very game changing opportunities, which I believe, and even in this moment of crisis. So, we had organizations who wanted to ensure that their globally disposed remote staff can continue to work and contribute from anywhere and everywhere, right? So the remote productivity and growth was something which was prima facie the number one objective. They also kind of reimaged the entire way they kind of delivered the most cost-effective and the most safest way to engage customers in a contactless world. And last but not the least, reinventing the entire ability to kind of impact people's life, which included primarily around healthcare and education. So ensure that there is an equitable access through telehealth and remote learning. However, I feel that there is a flip side to this, and what essentially happened was, as these users, data, devices, and applications, which were no longer confined to the traditional data center, which had been built like a fortress of sort, with all deep processes in place. Suddenly, what you found is we now have tons of remote users, hybrid users, branch office users accessing applications which are could be private within the data center or on public cloud, or SaaS applications which had exposed some very, very significant greater attack surface areas, right? And what it fundamentally led into was three key challenges, right? One, the number of endpoints is only going to increase, right? It's almost if you go by one statistic which says that there's going to be almost 3x increase in the number of endpoints by 2023, which means there's more strategic data being stored at these endpoints. B, enterprise security is not keeping pace with the cloud deployments, clearly in a shared responsibility model where you expect that the cloud service providers would look after the infra security, but the data security and everything else still remains in as part of your responsibility. So we saw a lot of inconsistencies being created as people started adopting cloud, with people struggling to deliver that same security across data center and cloud. And what this essentially meant is increased number of cyber attacks, because the adversaries out there, they realize that they have far more bigger attack surface area to go after, and they started leveraging some very, very sophisticated advanced technologies to kind of go after this. And we've seen almost 300% rise by some statistics in terms of the ransomware attack, right? So this is the kind of the other half of the challenge that we all went through. Where it comes down to is cybersecurity has gone mainstream, right? That's the fact. It is no longer relegated to a side discussion, but it is part of every boardroom conversation. Why? Because the threat landscape has completely changed. So we are really talking about adversaries ranging from independent hackers to nation state attacks to a malicious insider. And they're using all sophisticated means, really, really advanced means to leverage this attack surface. And case in point is, the recent examples, the supply chain led attacks with Kaseya and SolarWinds are one classic example where they kind of exploited these trust, this unquestionable trust between a vendor and its partners, right? So the impact of this breach, which the customer goes through, is very, very high, and the reason why it's being discussed in boardroom, because you're suddenly talking about millions and dollars of fine. You're talking about massive brand reputation damages. You're talking about declining in market value of the company. And some extreme cases, we've seen even the CEO getting fired, right? So there are multiple such examples which are on the extreme side. So essentially, while there are multiple frameworks and regulation which exist to remediate this, however, most often than not, right, what ends up happening is this, right, which is in a microservices-led API-driven hyper-connected world, with expansive surface area, there is a way, way too many companies, way too many solutions, and each solution solving some siloed use cases, which means all of your time you're spending up, in cybersecurity, integrating the data across these, managing the patches, upgrading the product. The average number of cybersecurity solution is in the tens, if not hundreds, right? So all this leads to a lack of the right skill set to manage. The cybersecurity skill set shortage is a fact. Alert fatigue. Think about the tens and thousands of alerts that gets generated each day, and it's supposed to manually look after. Lack of complete context across these, right? So all this is severely impacting your ability to kind of react and respond. And which is where in Palo Alto, we said, let's take a step back. Let's relook at the entire approach and start refresh and start at a very simple goal, right? Which essentially says that we want to secure all the users, irrespective of where they are and what devices that they're using, accessing whichever application, it could be in the data center or the cloud, generating data or exchanging data over whichever kind of networks, right, that they're using, with comprehensive context at all times across all locations, right? It just came down to this. And if you look at it, the converged platform approach, what you require to take, essentially needs to have three important characteristics, right? Number one, it needs to be integrated, right? So you have to look at your approach towards cybersecurity across in these different use cases. You have to look at solutions that work together, right? And bounded by some common threat intelligence framework, so that you are not left spending time working across individual silos and trying to make sense and trying to talk to each other, right? So it has to be integrated. Number two, it has to be automated, right? Which means all your ecosystem that does your platform should not be a mere platform which just kind of takes in huge tons of data, digests this data, and then just sits on it, right? So it needs to make sense and not just ingest data, and have a capability of responding real time across the enterprises. It no longer can afford to have relegated to manual workloads and manual ways and means to speed. I mean, the adversaries are running at a speed rate, fast pace. We need to ensure that your security, your platform is also responding, has the ability to respond real time using automated means. And last but not the least, it has to be simple. It has to be the entire architecture, the entire approach has to be very easy to deploy, easy to adapt, easy to reconfigure, easy to very, very agile, and has to be backed with very, very robust operationally supported plans, right? And have a very easy mechanism to kind of give you all that right visibility, reporting, compliance in a very, very simplified way. So that's what the converge approach means to us. So with that, we started this journey a few years back. And over the years, I think what happened is we realized this, and we have kind of acquired some really best of breed applications across key entities or across key elements of your enterprise. And what we did is we kind of brought these together, best of breed acquisitions, because our strategy was very clear. Either we develop something which is number one in that area, or we acquire somebody who's a number one in that entity that we are not present. So we over the years, we have kind of acquired a plethora of technologies which are like the number one solution use cases in their individual use case, and we brought that together and we've integrated. And what essentially it has come towards is a best of breed approach, giving you a platform, a 3-platform approach, which let me introduce you to each one of them here. So let's talk about Strata, which is essentially our world's first ML-driven next-gen firewall platform, which has a signature-less approach, giving you a complete device visibility, including your IoT devices, your behavioral anomaly detection, your risk-based automated policy recommendation, and not to mention your built-in inline enforcement and prevention, which is all coming in. All of these cloud delivered without the need of additional infra, covering all the critical use cases, including zero-day threats, including data loss prevention, including IoT security, and most importantly, also covering SASE, which is a secure access service edge, which is an amalgamation of your network as a service and network security as a service. So truly securing your networks everywhere, whether in physical form or whether we could be delivered in a virtual form in front of your cloud providers, or it could be delivered over the cloud using a SASE methodology, right? The next is the Prisma cloud platform, or the Prisma platform. This is the industry's most comprehensive cloud native security platform, securing your end-to-end application lifecycle in the most automated way, including your cloud security posture management. This is a Gartner created concept where we are securing all the services being offered by the CSP, the groups, the VLANs, the VPC, the storage buckets, the off-the-shelf databases and application servers, right? So think about those. 2, cloud workload protection. This is really all about securing that application, that environment, the software that you are developing on top of these cloud service provider infrastructure on a traditional VM, or could be the Kubernetes, the containers, serverless functions, so on and so forth. Cloud network security, right, which is an identity-based microsegmentation capabilities for entities within the cloud, right? And furthering that, we have the cloud infra entitlement management, CIEM, which is about enforcing permission and securing identities across your workloads and cloud. And last but not the least, shift left integration of security right into your DevOps cycle, right? While you are developing your code, it gets integrated. So it's bolt on and not an afterthought. All of these across all your major cloud service providers. Let's talk about Cortex. This is about really revolutionizing the security operations center. What the SOC analysts deals with today are a plethora of tools, as I said before, right? And each solving one problem, and they end up with more and more alerts, creating a constant shortage of your cybersecurity professional needs, right? So we believe in preventing everything at the outset. Things we can't prevent, use AI and ML to kind of detect all kind of sophisticated attacks, and then automate investigations to accelerate response, right? It essentially comes down to these three things. And this across your network, your endpoint, and cloud data. So this is where our extended data detection and response, XDR, or our extended security operations and automation, security orchestration, automation response, I beg your pardon, with its automated capability to orchestrate and response and really keep you ahead of the curve. Choose some integrated intelligent threat intelligence coming into this, and our ability to have visibility outside, from an outside in perspective, using the attack surface management and incident response. And all of these tied together with the data lake, where we take all of these rich information, normalize it with all the analytics, all the intelligence that's built in it. It has the ability to stitch together into across this and identifying the root cause of your breach, prevent as many as possible if you can't, and give you the best possible visibility that an analyst needs, right? Essentially, that's what it comes to. So I thought, let's take an example of how all of these come together and help drive a framework, something like a zero trust architecture, which is used by customers today to reduce the risk by establishing the right trust between the entities, avoiding the implicit trust. So to illustrate this, let's look at this example where a user is using an application, a client application, if you may say so, on over the internet, accessing an application, which could be a microservices architecture, with the front end being a web server, and the back end being a microservices architecture using a platform as a service, or which essentially could be a database, and all of this in a public cloud. Now, the entities you can't trust in this architecture are users, the endpoints and workloads, the applications, and finally the content. Right. So you see the circular wall around it is where you kind of create a sort of a protect surface coverage where you say anything before and after this I can't trust. So every transactions, every data, everything that I'm getting interface with, I need to prove that it has been validated and stuff. So in order to establish the right trust end to end between these entities, you need to ensure three things essentially, right? A, provide context-based access. B, make that access safe, right? Secure, so that it doesn't have malicious data or malicious entities or malicious code being exchanged. And have a very consistent access and security, have this consistently being driven and available everywhere, irrespective of what that device is, what that user is, where it is, and what kind of cloud infrastructure or applications that it has been accessing. So let's start with the most obvious component, which is the zero trust network architecture, which is the component between the user and the front end of the application in web server in this case. And this is driven by our Strata and Prisma access solution, or as I said, the firewall, next-gen firewall, which essentially comes here and ensures that all the we use some strong authentication mechanism to ensure that the users, we authenticate the users and they are what they claim to be, right? So we authenticate those, that the content that they are sending is right, whether it's using IPS or sandboxing or anti-malware solutions, ensuring that it's clean, and verifying the applications in the end, and the web server in this case, using some host profiling or URL filtering capabilities, right? So ZTNA is an important component of zero trust, but certainly not the only one. So let's look at the others. So even before the user hits the internet, we have an application running at the endpoint which the user uses. We have to make sure that this is safe, including the content on the endpoint, using the endpoint security product, right? So not only is the user has been authenticated, we claim what they are, and it's been validated, and the data on those devices has been checked against all kind of malicious content. We also have to remember that these endpoints are not necessarily now relegated to just a laptop or mobile. We have other type of endpoints, basically the IoTs. And in many cases, it is these IoTs that will be communicating to the network, right? So we have to establish trust for this IoT device, which we do using our IoT security solutions embedded into our Strata firewall platform. And it discovers, monitors, and applies all the right policies relevant to that IoT devices without the need for having an extra infrastructure or any additional skills required over there. So now we get into the next stage of the zero trust architecture, which is the backend applications, right, which are sitting behind the web server and which could be API-driven microservices-based architecture running thousands of services, VMs, containers, serverless functions, PaaS services. So within these microservices, we establish trust using our cloud-native Prisma Cloud solution that we talk about, right? So ensuring that each entity is within this API-driven economy is checked, the right access given, and all the security aspects, including DLP, is applied and checked upon, including a shift left architecture of ensuring that the code is also secured while it is written. And finally, we come to a layer over all of these, and that is the security operations center, which essentially looks after all the real-time zero trust decisions that were made or couldn't be made between these entities, looking at the data, the alerts, and analyzing them. And that's where we have the Cortex platform comes in, gathers all this info, puts them together, and allows a lot of automation monitoring this zero trust decisions taken by the Strata, Prisma Access, the endpoint solution, Prisma Cloud, and changing them if required. So now we finally come to a stage where you say, right, okay, we've understood the change in threat landscape. We have understood what a platform approach helps in, ties in together. But what does it mean for you, right? So essentially, you have to look at the outcome in two buckets. One, does the platform approach help in reducing your risk and improving your cybersecurity posture, right? Because at the end of the day, all solutions need to come together and manage your risk. So when you go with an integrated approach, you basically are assured of, there are no blind spots between these solutions, and it's much far more integrated, driving some better prevention and security. You are kind of getting into a simplified management tool, since say a single pane of glass across this platform, which helps you drive centrally driven policy management, which is essentially huge in your operational environment, and ensuring that you have the right set of trust being embedded between the entities and seamless access to all applications by all users. And not just that, how do you ensure that this gets into a cycle where every new thing that you start coming in, platform is ready to kind of support that ever increasing performance demands or new applications being brought in, including shadow IT, are kind of covered and your risk and visibility improves. That's one aspect. The other aspect is the TCO. So, because it's integrated, because your risk is lower, you have a far more lower accepted level of risk, which essentially reflects straight in your balance books in terms of savings in money, which you would have allocated. We talk about operational cost, because you're not talking about every new use cases being added with new tools. You're essentially talking about much lesser manpower, much lesser skills required to kind of manage the entire operation, thereby reducing the operational costs, including the indirect ones, which means, if you look at the sum total of the whole solution being driven, essentially cloud delivered, not having the need for kind of going into new areas and buying new use cases and negotiating back with your vendors. So essentially, you have a much improved cybersecurity posture, far lesser risk associated with an integrated approach, and a much more optimized TCO. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. So we are the world's leading cybersecurity company. Almost 95% of the Fortune 100 use us. And it's not for any other reason. It's this very reason that I spoke about, the ability to have better visibility, reduces, optimize TCO. We are the number one enterprise security company in the world, which is growing at a breakneck speed. And we have almost 77,000 customers, and we're spread across the globe. And we have a very, very robust, tax center, which is an average CSAT score of 9 up to 10, which I think is phenomenal. So with that, I want to thank you for your time here, and I hope this was fruitful, and I look forward to interacting with each one of you. My email ID is specified there. Thank you very much and have a nice day.